feels like 95% of the time in my life, I feel like I'm like underwater and I'm like swimming. It was so tough for me to get to class each day. And I got pretty lucky that I even graduated on time. Like, instead of like going to like therapy, like, oh, just go do improv. That does feel like when I'm most me. And it really made me look at myself differently. And man, like, am I the problem here?
ConnorEatsPants felt suffocated in high school. He felt alive when he streamed on Twitch. He developed that passion into a 7-figure streamer career, collaborating with jschlatt and Ludwig and hosting massive events. Over 15 years later from posting his first video, Connor feels burned out. I'm Eric, co-founder of Karat. We help Connor and other creators with their finances. And join us today as he shares how he deals with anxieties of internet fame, why Connor makes content, and what he's thinking about doing next. ConnorEatsPants.
Hello.
AKA Connor, thanks so much for joining us today. You last weekend were just fighting for the right to be the ultimate gamer,
Yes. And I got 10th. Well, top 12, but I'm saying top 10.
So how did that happen? How did you even get in contention to potentially be the ultimate gamer?
We went to a Valorant like after party for Worlds, and I was just in a conversation with Ludwig and Asu, and Lud's like, I need 2. And we're like, okay, we'll do it. So then we were just in, just last minute.
I kind of love that.
Yeah.
Do you remember the first time you ever played a video game?
There's like a couple distinct memories. I remember that like my cousin at one point gave me all his like old N64 games at one point, which really had me pretty excited. So I had like a bunch of like Pokemon Stadium and like Yoshi's Story, a couple other games. Then that I think was my first system. But I also had like I remember my dad at one point had me just at his office work, like he was working for the day and he got annoyed with me. And so he just took me to Toys R Us to like buy me a Game Boy that day.
And what about your dad? Did he ever like play these games with you? Or was
My dad never cared about games at all. He didn't understand it really.
I'll say for myself, when I was growing up, my parents would ration out the amount of time that I could play video games.
Oh yeah.
Because they like thought it would hurt my grades. And they saw the most important thing was to like do well in school so you can like one day go be a doctor. And so it'd be like, hey, if you get like straight A's, you can play video games for like 2 hours every weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. My parents did stuff like that too, I think. Especially once I got to like high school, it kind of changed because I started like streaming and stuff online. And so they thought that was like an outlet for me, I think, creatively, that I just hated school so much, and they could tell that it was kind of like, they kind of gave me a bit of leeway in that regard because they knew I was doing something somewhat productive if I was making like $70 a month at the time or something.
Actually, I mean, like as a student, just to be making income doing something that's also fun is kind of already amazing.
Right, yeah.
You mentioned you hated school.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? Like just the whole vibe, or?
I don't know. I mean, I think that like, I didn't have an issue with like people. Like I was relatively popular. I had good friends. I knew everybody and people liked me, but like I just couldn't stay in class anymore. Like I couldn't focus. I hated getting up in the morning to go, dreading the next day, having homework. It became so much for me in high school that I just started like having terrible anxiety and would just stay home half the time. Like I think that like I must have missed like so many days in high school. And I got pretty lucky that I even graduated on time because I was just like, it was so tough for me to get to class each day. It was not easy. So that's why like streaming became a good outlet for me to like at least like express myself in some way because I wasn't really like going to class and being super social anymore.
How did the streaming part get started? Because it's still like a pretty meaningful decision to go from I'm like playing games and I'm enjoying them to, hey, like let me go and play them and have people watch me online and see what happens.
I mean, I started like doing YouTube like 2007 when I was like 8, like when YouTube first started, like when I got a camcorder and I would like record my DS playing like Pokemon Wi-Fi battles and I would like talk over it and put it up to like no viewers. But I would do that. I would do like videos on like the Wii, just recording my TV playing Brawl or something, Smash Bros. Brawl. I did stuff like that for years, like sketch videos with friends too. And so I kind of knew about Twitch a little bit, like when it started. It must have been Justin TV, like 2012-ish, around there. And then I didn't have a computer that would like let me stream at the time until about, I want to say 2015, 2016. And then I started trying the stream. I think my first game I ever actually like tried the stream was the day Pokken Tournament came out on the Wii U.
Oh, I remember Pokken.
Yeah. I remember the day that came out, I was like, okay, I'm going to start streaming. I told that to like my YouTube subs at the time, which wasn't very many. And but yeah, once I did that, I really loved like the instant feedback of like chatting and like the improv that kind of came with that. Cause I did a little bit of improv in like middle school. And I felt like those talents like played in the streaming a bit more than YouTube. And so it was just a fun outlet to like get instant feedback from that. Like on YouTube, I only got through like comments.
Right.
And so, yeah, I'd get maybe 35 views on a video and get 2 comments. It was still exciting. But on Twitch, maybe I got like 50 chats in the whole stream.
Wow.
And it just kind of energized me more to keep going.
I also didn't realize you took improv as a middle schooler.
Yeah.
That's super f***ing cool.
It was only for like a year. It was like my school offered it like one time. But yeah, I remember getting a lot out of that. I think that helped with like introvertedness too. Like just like performing in front of people and like having to like improvise without a script. It's kind of embarrassing, or it feels embarrassing, but you kind of push yourself over that hump. And I think that kind of went a long way.
Before doing improv versus after doing improv, did you notice, even just in like normal social life, just like interacting with people casually, was there differences, or it was more specific when you were actually creating content?
I mean, it was so much earlier in my life. I can't really tell if it was like if it actually changed things, but I definitely think that like the skills and things you learn in improv absolutely help outside of it. I have people that still do stuff like that always sing its praises. People that like tell people that like instead of like going to like therapy, like, oh, just go do improv because it could help you break down barriers you don't know.
As another fellow introvert, I went through something very similar. I started taking public speaking courses when I was in high school.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, oh my God, like I need to interact with the world, and it helps, but I still, at the end of the day, I'm really, really tired.
Yeah.
And so I'm super curious, in high school, you're starting to stream. Was it something that like gave you energy where you're like, hey, I feel more awake and empowered? Or was it something like, oh, at the end of this, I actually feel very tired?
It was energizing, 1,000%. I mean, I was just like, again, so much dreading school. And with that, like, I mean, this is a whole side tangent, but at the time I got diagnosed with like OCD and like anxiety disorders, depression, all that comes with it. And so that was like, when I was doing that, it felt like the rest of the world didn't exist. It just was like my little corner to like do what I wanted to do. I went to like a conservative Christian school too. So like my humor and stuff never really landed there at all, or I never felt like I could really express it. Whereas like on Twitch and making content, I could just completely like be myself. And so, yeah, I think that was pretty energizing for me in general to look forward to streaming each day.
You can be yourself, and people actually
you get rewarded
seem to vibe with that.
Yeah, you get rewarded for it.
Versus everyone looks at you like...
Right. Everybody's like, whoa.
I also have OCD anxiety. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I kind of get what you're saying, where sometimes when you feel like you're with people who just accept you, like I just feel so much more comfortable, almost like a different person, versus if I'm around people who like I'm afraid of, or I think that they're judging me, I just like completely freeze up. Like I can't even say anything.
The way I usually describe it is like, it feels like 95% of the time in my life, I feel like I'm like underwater and I'm like swimming. And then like, if I'm like with people that like I'm comfortable around, it's like that 5% of the time, like that's when it feels like I'm in a normal spot for once. Otherwise I just feel like I'm drowned by can I curse on this?
Everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just drowned by shit around me. Yeah.
How did you find these people online? Because like, even if you start streaming, I think it's one thing to like go and do it. I think it's another to find that community of people who like actually appreciate you for what you do.
I say I got pretty lucky, but I think that like, if you're yourself and you put yourself out there, you will gravitate and find the people that you should find, I think. But I still feel pretty lucky to meet the friends that I've met in the time that I have. Like, I definitely attribute a lot of my success to just knowing people that are successful and happen to be successful around me and stuff like that. But, at the same time too, it wasn't that way without my own sort of growth as well. But like, I remember like when I first started growing on Twitch, getting even a little bit of momentum from like 5 viewers average for like 3 years to like 10, 15. That was when jschlatt found me through a viewer of mine who was also a viewer of his. At the time he had like 70, 80K YouTube subs, so substantially more than me, but not nearly what he has now. And then a few months after that, he got on like this popular like group Minecraft server that was just getting tons of attention. And he was pretty much like, you should get this Connor guy on here because he'd be really funny. And that's what gave me a huge, like, lot of more eyes on me than I would have had otherwise. But even then, like I could see that like it was mainly a Minecraft audience. that like might not totally fit like what I like to do. And so I would stream the Minecraft stuff for like 2-3 hours and then immediately go back to like my variety stuff, whatever else I would do, which ended up paying off huge because a lot of people that were growing a lot more than me at that time doing only Minecraft had like substantially more fall offs than I did because I just always established my variety stuff early on.
You mentioned you would ensure there's a balance between the Minecraft content and what you actually like to do.
Yeah.
What do you actually like to do? What's like the best feeling when you're making content?
It just depends. It's a tough thing to answer lately because I feel like lately, now that I've done it for so many years, I think I have a different answer to that I haven't really found yet. Because not to say I'm like super burned out lately, but it's definitely like a way to describe it, that like I've done all this content that like I've kind of wanted to do, like playing weird games or playing a game that I like and making a video or being funny on it or something, that deciding like what I like about this career isn't something I can really pinpoint exactly. It's mainly just like if I have a creative itch for a game and I feel like I can share it with other people while also like adding humor to it in a sense, that is motivating to me in a way. Because like I always really liked how people packaged like YouTube videos or like content, like Donkey, for example.
I love video game Donkey.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Donkey and Leah,
so I always like how like, I love his Halo video.
Yeah.
So if I want to go see Donkey play Halo, he has his established Halo stuff that he's done. And that's kind of a way I look at my own stuff, is like if I've done something before, like that's there and that's out there. I want to do something else. I don't want to keep doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's. I don't really put words to it very often, but I'm trying to find it. But yeah,
You're describing, because I feel like there's so many ways to view your work as a streamer, as a creator. Like some people, they view it very much like as a business. I would say like that's the Mr. Beast vibe.
Yeah.
Right. What you're describing is a little bit more. It's like your artistry. It's not enough to just be making the same thing over and over, even if it financially supported you. I'm hearing a part of you is thinking through, I have to have a creative itch.
Yeah.
There's something I need that do with it that I can uniquely provide that people can watch and like laugh at.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I definitely feel that way. It doesn't always show, I think, especially as a streamer, when like lately, like people just want to see like React content and
It's
games
popular.
don't do as well. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
popular. You know, you got to do what you got to do. But you know, it is something that I do consciously think about a lot of the time, because I like that kind of packaging of things. I like putting something out there of substance that I can refer back to and kind of be proud of, rather than it, you know, being big for 2 weeks and then no one remembers that video or content or stream I ever did.
Well, I think it's the same mentality that led to your success even from S&P, because a lot of people, they just kept making Minecraft content, and you already had things you cared about outside of it, which is why you switch over the stuff you were doing. And ironically, that actually helped you do a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah.
What pieces of content, when you look back at how many years have you now been streaming? Well, you started YouTube when you were 8, you said, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like over 15 years now.
Yeah. I guess so.
So over 15 years of content, which like in itself, that is like a child who's like, I don't know, in like 11th grade in high school, the time that you've been streaming and making content. What are the pieces you say you have been most proud of creatively?
Oh man, there's like a couple things that like I look back on that I'm like really like that was I like this idea and how I executed it fully. Like I used to do a series called the Pantsies, which was like this award show I did at the end of the year that would like reward like it would give like mock awards to like viewers, and I'd have like big popular guests like present the awards. I haven't done it for like 2-3 years now, but that at the time was really fun to do, even if it was a lot of work. There was another time, like, I think what I've always considered like my biggest stream that I was most proud of was probably my Animal Crossing fishing tournament, which was right when the pandemic started. The timing worked out perfect. Everybody was on Twitch, and I got, it was me, Ludwig, Mizkif, Clint Stevens, and Pokimane that I just got them all to join me on Animal Crossing for a fishing mini game event that I would score. And I just had a bunch of bits like I put around the island that I planned out. Everything just went perfect. And that's still probably the stream and thing I'm most proud of, because even at the time too, like I could have invited like jschlatt too at the time, people a lot of the time associated me with for content, but I purposefully didn't, because I wanted to like have a different kind of corner that I was working with. And jschlatt didn't even have Animal Crossing, even though I tried. But yeah, so I always look back at that as something that like I want to try to capture again and do something similar.
Connor, as I'm listening to describe the Pantsies and Animal Crossing fishing vibes, your eyes are like literally lighting up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like, to be honest, it's been tough to find anything like that in the past like 2 years.
Yeah.
Like since like I moved out and like really like it became my life, I think that like the stresses of life have like distracted me a bit creatively. And so I do look back at those things pretty fondly in that regard.
It's like a golden moment of this was so good.
Yeah, and like I've got friends that like I think do scratch the itch for themselves all the time, like Ludwig people, and you know I really like surrounding myself with those kind of people because I don't know. I think eventually it will get me back to being able to do all that consistently again.
You mentioned it was prompted in part when you moved and made it your life. Like, what do you mean by that?
I don't know. I think that like I think that's a big transition point for anybody in their lives is when you move out and get into the world, I guess.
Yeah, you're in Texas before, right?
Yeah, I moved to Austin. So I'm from Atlanta, but I moved to Austin when right after the pandemic. How old was I? Must have been 20. I just turned I turned 21. I was 21. Me and Schlatt moved out there, and that was cool. And I really love all my friends in Austin. I'm really glad I did that at the time because I was about to like buy an apartment like in Atlanta and like stay there forever.
Wow.
And then literally the pandemic hit and canceled those plans.
So when the pandemic occurred, you were still in Atlanta.
Yep.
And that's where you're doing things like the fishing activity.
So I did the fishing thing that March, yeah.
Yeah, and then you mentioned when you moved and it made it your life, that's when a lot more stresses and a lot more things just sort of came along.
Yeah, I think that I didn't have a picture for myself of like what life would be like if this is like a job. Like how would I schedule my days? What would I do? Like what am I planning for in the future? Stuff like that. And so I think a lot of that came into play to an extent. But at the same time, I'm very lucky to be able to do what I like to do for a living. So, you know, it wasn't ever too much of a stress. But when I try to think like what changed, where like I'm not scratching the itch as much anymore, I think that that's probably the best thing to point to.
It's like the craziest thing in the world. It's studies have shown like when you do something that you love because nobody is rewarding you, that's like pure intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
And when people start to give you money and external validation for that, it boosts it whenever you get it. But then when you're not getting it anymore, that innate motivation actually drops a bit.
Yeah.
Because you start to get hooked to the other things that come along with it.
Yeah.
And so it's like the weirdest thing when, similarly to you, I've been doing Karat for long enough that in the beginning it was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired of the corporate life. I get to do something of my own. And then you do it long enough and it becomes like a creature of its own with like its own needs and obligations to keep it sustainable and successful as its own project.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, like I still like doing this. Like I'm really grateful I get to do this, but also like now it's like weird. It's like this used to just be fun. And now it's like things I feel like I need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally can relate.
So when you were in Atlanta, and you were creating content, you were streaming, were you full time?
Technically, yeah. The only other job I've ever had was spinning the sign outside Little Caesars for like a week.
When was that?
I think I was like 17. And it was right before senior year of high school. It was like the corner of the street that I lived on. You just spun the sign saying like Little Caesars this way. And it was like a week. And I'm like, it's too hot. I'm not doing this anymore.
Were you good at it?
No, not at all.
I was like, is there an alternate
I didn't do any
variant?
tricks with it or anything. I was just like, go this way.
I'm just saying there's an alternate universe. There's a variant of you who is like the spin master of all time.
Yeah.
We've been deprived of in this world.
Yeah,
because
maybe.
So basically for 1 week, you're like, let me try a different type of job.
Yeah.
You tried it. And you're like, no, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, it wasn't even tried a time of job. It's like streaming wasn't even making me enough money at that point for my parents to think I had a job. So it was like, you need to get a job. You need to do something.
So they were telling you like, you need to go and get paid.
Yeah.
And especially because you told me already, like you hated school.
Yeah.
So you were like 17, like, were you thinking of like doing college, like the traditional path, all those things?
So the time I thought was like, I didn't really have, like ideally I was like, hopefully streaming could become my life or something, but I didn't actually think that was realistic. I wanted to maybe do like film writing and stuff. So that was my thought. I actually went to college for 6 months, like around Atlanta for like film. And I worked on like, it was Infinity War and Zombieland 2 that like I worked like production on, which basically meant like we tilled the field for Wakanda for Avengers, and then we like set up the rigging lights for Zombieland one time. But I realized there doing that I hated like on-set production. I was like, this is awful. This is not creative. I'm not creatively fulfilled at all. I'm not making anything I see or feel I hated it. So at that point I was like, well, maybe I'll do like writing, which is probably what I would have ended up doing, was like some sort of like writing gig. But then right around that time is when streaming started to do pretty well. And so then I was like, well, I'm just not doing this anymore.
I had no idea that you were studying production and you tilled the Wakandan fields for Infinity Wars.
Yeah. It was just a big, and they used it for a lot. It was the same field for Zombieland as well.
I don't know if you've seen that meme where Charlie, Moist Critical, jokes about his
he was in Hunger Games.
The Hunger Games, and it's like this huge thing.
Yep.
I feel like I just want everyone watching that if you enjoyed Infinity Wars and Zombieland 2, you have this man to thank.
We made it look really good.
Contributions, literally tilling the fields for your viewing pleasure. I think that should be like an Oscar for practical effects in another world.
I've been saying it.
You just have not been appreciated that way.
They don't appreciate the right people in this
industry. I'm glad you and Charlie are now helping shed light on the real contributors. Shows wouldn't be the same without this background characters.
They wouldn't.
Without those fields.
They added to it, for sure.
Also, I kind of love this concept where I just picture you're like spinning your sign at age 17. You like hate school. Your parents like, dude, you need to fucking do something. You're like, okay, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to study production. Seems creatively potentially fulfilling. And then you're just like, hoeing fields.
Yeah.
And you're like,
it was awful.
Why am I doing this?
It was so bad. It was just, I barely learned anything. Well, I mean, like they tried to teach me stuff about like how to set up like a camera rig and stuff and the lighting and the gaffing and all that. But like, it was just in one ear out the other. I was like, I hate this.
I really hope a streamer one day, maybe Lud, does something that involves a field. And that's like, you've been preparing for this all along. This is your moment to shine.
Yeah. We'll see.
We'll see. There's this concept. Have you heard of Chekhov's gun?
Yes.
So it comes from, and I'm probably saying his name wrong, but this Russian scriptwriter and playwright Chekhov, who said if in Act 1 you see a gun hanging over the fireplace in like a plaque, you know in Act 3 you have to shoot that gun because there's only so much detail the audience is going to care about. If you introduce the element here, you're going to have to make use of it later. And so there's a parallel corollary to that called Chekhov's skill, where like if a character, you see this a lot in like anime or manga, like they say they're really good at something, you know that's going to have to
skill, of course.
Exactly. And so like we've now established in like Act 1 of your life, you're very good at practically tilling fields. One day, I hope.
We're really overselling how well I tilled the field.
This should be the main focus of the podcast. The thumbnail is going to be you like tilling a field. It's going to be like Connor Eats Pants, more like Connor Hoes Fields.
Yep.
I kind of love it. So, okay, you mentioned though, you didn't think you'd get to do streaming as like a full-time thing. This is part of the reason why you went to school.
Yeah.
And you studied film. Like, why not?
I think a lot of people like have this mindset they know they're going to, and I've just never been like that confident in myself in that regard, I guess. So like I didn't want to give myself an unrealistic expectation that it would be my life, because that would be like ideal. I think at the time I is the way I thought about it. But then it just sort of happened. But it was only happening because I was working hard doing it. Like I did stream like every single night at the same time for like 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, even for 3 years, you literally said you were putting up like Wi-Fi battles and like playthroughs of video games. So I'm like, I don't know, like 10 people are watching these.
Yep.
It's so funny because there's this common refrain when they see someone blow up, they're like, oh, this is an overnight success. I think someone who didn't know your story might just be like, oh yeah, like.
Yeah, he played Minecraft and.
Of course he's huge. Like that's how he got big. And I'm like, dude, this man has been making content for like a decade. Like put some respect on his name.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hearing you describe is like, I don't really like these other things that conventionally people expect me to do, but I don't know if streaming is going to work because it's hard and like not a lot of people are watching. So fine, like I'll go to college. I'll do this 6 months of film. And then you said you actually left because the streaming thing started to take off.
Yeah.
Like, was this around when you mentioned, like your viewer went to jschlatt, was like, hey, you should bring in this Connor guy?
So that met jschlatt that January, got on the Minecraft server around March, stopped going to college in April.
What about the chemistry between you and jschlatt you feel was unique?
I think jschlatt is naturally super funny and like in a main character sense, and the way that we were doing bits on like that Minecraft server, I feel like a lot of other people were funny, but they didn't really know how to play off of it very well. Whereas like me knowing improv, I think, which played super well into the way that like the Minecraft server comedy landscape worked. it just fit perfectly. And so I just kind of found ways to like get the bits to go better, knew how to supplement stuff and keep it moving mainly. Like a lot of that came into play.
So he has strong protagonist energy. Other people don't understand how to riff with him.
Right.
Because you went through your improv comedy training arc.
Yeah.
And you've been making content for years. You're like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
And at what point did you wake up and realize like, oh, actually I can support myself and do this full time? Like, was there a moment?
I remember like that summer, like turning on my stream and like having a weird feeling that like people got the notif and were like there when it started. And I was like, that's pretty crazy that people are showing up initially and not just going on Twitch and then looking at following and seeing I'm live. People are showing up to the website because they saw I went live. Like that was pretty crazy to me. And at that point, my thought was like, okay, this is going to like go away, and like I'll settle at like maybe 100 viewers or something, but I can still work with that. Like I can work with that. That was my mindset was at. But then it just kind of kept going. Yeah.
You kept grinding.
Yeah.
You kept moving further and further along.
Yeah.
And you decided after the pandemic to move to Texas. Mm-hmm. What was the motivation behind that? I mean, you said you almost bought a place in Atlanta, actually.
Yeah, well, we had friends in Austin at the time that we visited December of 2020 that pretty much convinced us to like try to move out there and see how we like it. And that was kind of the main thing for us. There were just a bunch of other streamers out there that we liked and got along with, and we both of us didn't move away for college. It was like it just kind of made sense to like have that experience. Mm-hmm.
So how does it work when you're like living with and friends with the people you also work with? And I say this because like my co-founder was my best friend.
Yeah.
And when we started working together, it was just like weird because it's like everything you talk about is like work.
Yeah.
In a weird way. And then like we literally like schedule friend dates to just like go and hang out and do stuff that's like not tied to work at this point.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like what's that like when you're like a streamer living with other streamers where everything can be content?
Well, I mean, honestly, what happened with jschlatt and I is we didn't really do as much content once we started living together. Like we totally could have. I definitely should have, because I think I should have. It definitely would have been smart to like try to do like a podcast or something together like that. We just didn't. But I kind of like that because it made the relationship more like he's a genuine friend.
Yeah, it's actually real when I'm not dependent.
We weren't dependent on stuff, and like I wasn't always talking about work. So I don't know. It never really occurred to me at the time, but yeah.
I kind of love you mentioned initially should have, and you immediately caught yourself and corrected yourself. Because it's like you said, you made that choice for a reason.
Yeah.
If you had tried to do it, the relationship would have just been a little bit different than what it actually has been.
We talked about doing a podcast together in the next year now that like time has gone on, we don't live with each other anymore. And people want to see us make content together again. So it'll probably happen, but it's, we'll see.
I remember Aiden mentioned the friendships that he built with Slime, with Nick, with Lud. Initially, their podcast was just them just catching up and having a good time as friends, but now it's evolved into like, this is actually like when they see each other now. They don't live together anymore. Like everyone's living their own lives. Yeah. It became like, let's just hang out to like, cool, I'm glad I'm going to at least get to see you because we have this regular podcast.
I remember like somewhat calling that with them when that summer, the first time jschlatt and I moved out there, Aiden and Nick came to visit us for a couple of days, stayed in our house, and like, Nick showed me the podcast set design that he drew up for the yard. I was like, that's going to be awesome. I'm like, it's going to blow up. And he's like, oh, we'll see. I'm like, no, you guys are going to do great. But like, it's going to be weird after a while. But yeah, here we are.
That's basically
that's pretty much exactly what happened. But I knew that they'd kill it.
Yeah.
Because they were always so funny and they have so many funny stories.
And it's like, again, speaking with Aiden, that's become his creative work, like his artistry.
Yeah.
Right? It's something now. He was thinking of like moving and living across the world, but he's staying in LA now because of the podcast. Like it's kind of become his baby. I'm really curious for yourself. Like you've mentioned, right, the Pantsies. Did I pronounce that right?
Yep.
The Pantsies. You've mentioned the whole fishing arc. When you now think about what you want to create going forward, you said you're going through a period of time where like it comes in waves. Sometimes you're creatively inspired. Sometimes you're less so. What have been the things that help bring that creative inspiration to you? Is it like the environment, the people, like the types of content styles that are doing well, like types of games? Yeah.
I think it does help when like the constant cycle or like the meta is something that I do genuinely enjoy. That definitely helps. But in terms of like how I find that creativity? I think that that's honestly still a question I'm trying to answer for myself and figure out. Because like even viewers of mine can vouch that like I haven't been doing as much, or like not, I haven't been doing as many big events, just because like I've been pretty transparent. Like the motivation's not there. I'm not going to force it. And it's also like, if I was to force it, then I would be really unhappy with the product that I was making.
Yeah.
And I think that having the at least the idea that like I will come back to like this stuff and like do these things, I know I will, because it's what I like. It's what I like to do. But, at the time, I'm just trying to figure myself out and figure out how I want to shape my life if it revolves around my creative output as my job and my livelihood.
I'm hearing this like combination of, okay, I'm not sure what I want to do right now because the creative inspiration is there. And if I force myself, it just becomes a job, which is the worst feeling in the world. And everyone can tell. Balanced with this, you have this like confidence in yourself where you're like, it's going to be something.
Yeah. I've realized stuff just kind of works out if like I'm doing what I feel like I'm meant to do.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like I'm in the right spot doing what I'm meant to do. And now it's like trying to figure me out while I'm doing that.
Like that's an incredibly strong sense of self and principle. Is that something that's developed over the years, or something that you've had powering you even in those early days, 8 years old, putting up Wi-Fi battles?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of times like characterize it to myself as like a negative. Like I don't have a sense of self, or I don't know how I'm supposed to go about things, or I just feel lost. But when you do put it like that, it does give me a bit of perspective that like that recognition of that is important too. And sometimes I probably don't give myself credit for that, of knowing I need to like take a break or slow down or stuff like that.
Well, I mentioned that because in some ways, I think the hardest thing when you create, partially because you genuinely enjoy it, but also like it also supports you financially.
Yeah.
There's always this weird like, gosh, okay, I don't feel creatively fulfilled right now. What do I do about that? And I think there's two paths people take. One is just like freak the out. Yeah. And the other is like, well, you kind of just have to wait and kind of believe in yourself in a weird way.
Yeah.
And like, that's the vibe I'm getting from you, where you're like,
yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how I've felt the past 2 years, I think, is like, I'm just trying to figure it out. And I say wait, it's not like I haven't not made content the past 2 years. Like I've been streaming, but like, I do consider like just like casually streaming, at least in how I look at it and how I look at my own output, to not be like that demanding creatively. Like I'm kind of just clicking go live. And
you're still working, but it's a little different. And you said like, you've been looking at yourself being like, what is my sense of Connor? I'll share, for me, for over 25 years of my life, I really grew dependent on people's external validation and perceptions of me, right? I was a good Asian boy. I went to Harvard. I worked on Wall Street. I worked at Instagram, because I was really addicted to this repeated like, oh, well, like who is Eric? Oh, like I work at X, or I did this, right? Yeah. And it's not until I was like super miserable, I quit all, I did a bunch of therapy, that I finally was willing to just sit there and reach the point you're at now, which was, I'm just like not going to force myself to do anything, kind of see what happens. Yeah. And I began to find myself more via like principles and routines. Like I'm the type of person who is going to work out X times a week because I care about my physical fitness, going to see my friends X times because I care about friendship, going to read something new versus, XYZ external bits of achievement. And ultimately that was like huge for my life and helped prompt me to start Karat, which I'm doing now. I'm curious for yourself, when you think about Connor, like how do you describe your identity?
What I put out online as like ConnorEatsPants, like I think a lot of people would say that like it's a caricature or something, but it really is like a true extension of myself, I think.
It's
like
a part of you.
It definitely is. And arguably it's more me than a lot of things, because I think that it's when I'm in that like flow state of like creating like something I'm passionate about, and like I'm being funny and making people laugh in a certain sense, like that does feel like when I'm most me. And so I think that, that to an extent is the output that I'm kind of proud of. But when you say like, who is Connor outside of that, I think that's kind of like why I've slowed down, like why I'm trying to figure that out too.
Because in a way, when you think of Connor as I'm in my flow state when I'm creating and I'm funny. Yeah. What happens if you're not feeling creative and funny?
Exactly.
Then it's like,
yeah, exactly. Well, that's exactly what I've been trying to figure out. Yeah.
When you look back at, again, the pieces you mentioned you're most proud of, let's talk, for example, the fishing piece that you did during COVID. What helped put that idea in your head? Do you remember? Were you just like sitting around one day and you're like, let me do this thing? Because it's like a lot of work to coordinate it across so many different people.
Yeah, I think I had the idea like initially just by like Animal Crossing has online play. So it was like, okay, I could do something with other people. And pretty immediately once it launched, and especially once I saw that you could like create like custom like textures or things to put into the game, no matter how ridiculous, you could make some really crazy things if you wanted to. And I was like, that's really funny. There's so much potential there. So then I started messaging like people that like I knew, like, would you be down to do this fishing thing? And once they all said yes, like, which surprised me to an extent, I was like, oh, well, okay, awesome. And that really energized me because it was like, I can actually make this stupid idea I had into something that actually is taking place.
Fascinating. So I'm like, even there, I'm hearing like 3 different things, right? Like number one, clearly you like doing things with other people, right?
Yeah.
That you trust and appreciate and feel creatively supported
I think
by.
that like the best Twitch content is always going to be collaborative.
Yeah.
Like that's a big reason why like my streams often are solo is because I want all my collaborative things to like have intention like that. Like a lot of streamers are always doing collaborations and always doing things together, which I think is fine.
Right.
But like for me, I want to establish my own like solo presence for like my audience. And then like when I'm doing something with so-and-so or another person, like it's important to people and they know it's like a big collaborative thing I'm doing.
It's like you treasure it. You want people to understand like this is really meaningful.
Yeah.
And you should care of the quality of the creative work that we're going to do together.
And it does take a bit of the social anxiety stress off me too, though,
Yeah.
when I'm not feeling like every stream needs to like get into a Discord call with people and present that publicly. I think that for a lot of people that stream actually is easier, but for me, that's just like, I that gives me anxiety. Like I do that all the time.
Right. If there's an expectation, like, oh, let me go and create with someone else. In a weird way, it's like, it's precisely because you care so much about the quality of your output and the potential collaboration. That's why you're not just like, oh, let's just like hop on a Discord call and just do something casual.
So the
like,
Among Us era was so difficult. I was like,
because it's so
everybody's
casual.
doing things all the time. It's like,
oh, just like hop in the lobby and you're like, okay.
Yeah. And I personally felt that like I still think that like a big part of what makes a good streamer is how you bounce off your chat properly and manage it. And I think that like when you're with other people, it becomes a lot more difficult to like talk to your chat separately from the person that you're talking to on stream and all that and make that content.
Yeah. And so you're also thinking through, cool, I want to collaborate, but how do I ensure my community feels along with the ride?
Yeah.
Versus, hey, I used to interact with them when I'm solo and now I'm here with Lud or somebody and they're just kind of vibing there.
Yeah.
It's like, weirdly, not only do you hold your collaborator in high regard and the output together, you also hold your community in high regard, which like all combines to make it harder to just casually jump in and do something. It's like, no, like this is a thing.
To an extent, it's overthinking, but you are right. It is like actually thought out in that regard too.
I mean, I don't think it's, well, maybe other people watching think it's overthinking. To me, like that's the same way I think. Like when I started doing this podcast, it's deep down, I always want to create my own content. And I never really figured out the type of content that I wanted to make until I started this because like, I'm just getting to know you better.
Yeah.
And like, to me, this is precious because you are now an actual human being in my mind, somebody that I'm getting to know versus, hey, I see you somewhere. I'm like, hello.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that meaningful intention behind us setting up time and coming to do this together, it's really different.
Yeah.
And so like, I actually get what you're describing. The second thing you mentioned when you're talking about how this all came together, the creative part, when you realized I can make really wacky textures.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, hey, like there's actual room and tools to do funny.
Yeah. So like, for example, like I made so what I did is I made a whole second character on Animal Crossing. So I had a whole nother house that I could use.
Like alter ego.
Yeah. And so I used that house to like set up like where you would like see the rules for the games. Like each room would like show like a different game and the rules that we're going to use for it. But then like I set up a whole comedic bit where like the basement was just like a computer with like a tissue box. And then I made you could put on the computer screen.
Sometimes your hands just get really chapped.
Yeah. You could just put hub on the computer screen. So that was
that's
literally
amazing.
like, it's like a very pixelated version, but like you can tell when you look at the computer screen Animal Crossing, like, oh, that's the hub logo.
Yeah,
and
orange
so
and
like,
black.
And so like I just have such a funny clip of like Pokey like going to the basement and then going like, oh, I think going right back up the stairs, because like I just set up that whole bit just for that.
Because it was organic, it was natural.
Yeah.
You set up the environment knowing it would spark really funny things.
Yeah. Nope.
I love that because you saw the potential of what you could make.
Yeah, it was all. There's a lot of that in like Minecraft too. Like the SMP like humor had a lot of like.
Yeah.
It's because it's a sandbox game. You could set up things that that would be funny when you're actually performing it or whatever on stream. And yeah, so that's kind of what I did with Animal Crossing.
I have this fundamental belief that constraints can help breed creativity in the sense when you give someone just a total blank slate, sometimes it's harder to figure out what to do when, for example, Animal Crossing, it's not like you can do literally anything.
Yeah.
There are rules, but in a weird way that forces you to be clever. You're like, okay, like here are the things I can do. Like, okay, I can like set up my house. I can set up my rooms. I can do textures. Oh, now I have an idea. Go into the basement and find the monitor with like tissue boxes, right?
Yeah.
There's like a little
But not even
clever-
tell anybody to go down there. Like just
Exactly.
like have it there for someone to find, because it would be a funny stream moment.
Yeah, it's like the confidence in your own work. I don't need to push this. I don't need to tell Pokey like,
Yeah, go
hey,
to the
go to the basement and like pretend to be surprised.
I know people will just do it.
I love that. And the third thing you mentioned that I heard you were really excited about was like, number one, this intentionality behind we're going to do something together. Number two, just the creativity you discovered you could do in the game for funny bits organically. And number three, it's like, oh, wow, like I'm making this happen.
Yeah.
I'm sort of hearing expressed. You mentioned, you're like, I reached out to a couple of people, didn't know what they would say if they were down. And they were.
Yeah, it was just like a fleeting idea, and then once everybody was down, then the ideas really start flowing, because I'm like, I can really actually tangibly make this happen.
Which is pretty cool.
yeah.
Because like this is like a Connor thing now that
Yeah.
you are making happen that would have not existed otherwise.
Yeah.
And I don't know as much about the Pantsies, but I think of that too as really unique because like you're hosting it. You're involving your community in like a really meaningful way. A lot of streamers, other ones might not. And again, I've literally never seen. I can imagine the rewards being like very clever and creative.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's just like a P&G award, but like the idea is that like at the time, I think this big reason why I stopped is 'cause I kind of grew out of like the ability to, I think, do it in the way that I did, where it was like rewarding like individual chatters and people that were like in the community, for example. I'm just not able to be as like in it to, I think.
Because it's gone so much bigger.
It's gotten a lot bigger.
It's scaled, which is like the
Yeah.
price of your own success.
Yeah, exactly. But like it was at the time, it was funny to like have like best chatter. There was like best female. It was just like if you're a girl in the chat, apply. And it was
Right.
like,
Because the
who
whole
wins?
joke is like, haha,
it
there's
was
like not
the
many
whole
women.
joke. Yeah, that was the entire bit, and we had a bunch of awards, just stupid ones like that, like worst chat message of the year, just dumb things, and then like when you get like an absurd guest to like present it. So like at the time, like this is before I even did the fishing thing with Pokey. So like my chat didn't really knew that I met Pokey. So like Pokey surprises by presenting an award. People are like, what the hell is going on? And then like they have like had like Tobuscus that year, like right before he got into like the like whatever he's doing now. But like that was just people were like, what is like, why is this person here? And that was really funny to me.
I'm almost hearing you. It's like when you put together a moment that people who watch are just like, what the f-?
Exactly.
It's like, that's when you're like, oh yeah, I did something cool.
Yeah. And I think that is kind of like what got me on like Germa's radar too.
Yeah.
It's like
Because he does similar
Germa
things.
does a lot like that.
It's like
he's
very
a big
creative
inspiration in
concepts.
that regard. And doing stuff like that is what got me on his radar and got him to like reach out to me and become a friend, because he does all that stuff all the time.
And I love too, because for instance, when you're talking about the Pantsies, it's precisely because you've become more known and more successful that you're not able to have that same level of engagement with your community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is like very ironic.
Yep. It is. But, you know, there's probably a way to figure it out. And I hope to get there at some point to bring it back.
So when you look back at your journey, there's like so many things that you've done. And honestly, the biggest takeaway I have for me as I'm getting to know you better is I'm thinking of you like really as an artist who cares a lot about the craft and integrity of your work. Now, your medium happens to be through the games you're playing,
Yeah.
right? Through the variety of things you're doing, right? Through chat, through streaming, but you're trying to put together these like moments. I'm really curious when you think, this goes back to our earlier question, like what is Connor's identity and sense of self beyond I have put together these moments?
Yeah.
Do you remember like what's like the happiest moment you've ever had in your life that you can recall?
Oh man, I don't know. Maybe like.
And while you do that, let me turn on the lights.
Oh yeah, for sure. I don't know. Happiest moment of my life. I feel like it'd have to be like getting a Wii on Christmas or something. That's probably what comes to mind is like when like I had a Wii under the Christmas tree when I got up and I could play what even came out, Wii Sports. that was cool.
Do you
at the
remember how
time.
old you were?
Yeah, I was 8. So it'd been,
Wow,
yeah.
so this is like around the same time where your dad was like, stop bothering me, go play Pokemon.
Yeah, a lot of happened today, I guess. I mean, like recently, I don't even know. Like, I think that like the feeling after a stream, like the fishing one or after the Pantsies is really awesome. And I definitely look back to those as like pretty motivating moments. I would say like the coolest, not necessarily the happiest, but
Sure.
like the coolest was I think when I did Ludwig's Mogul Money Live last year.
I was in the audience. I saw you.
That was, I think, the coolest thing.
Why? What was cool about it?
It was just crazy. Like, I think it was the most like tangible, like I think for all of us there, like no matter how big the streamer, like Miz, Soda, Pokey, people too felt the same of like, we were in like a big theater.
Oh
like,
yeah.
It was
packed.
the
YouTube theater. Yeah.
The new theater. So the new Rams stadium or whatever is where it's at. And it's like a huge theater, completely packed with like people that want to see streamers. And like we're on stage and we make people laugh and do all the like.
And it's live.
I thought it was awesome. I still feel like I don't talk about it as cool as it was because I just thought it was so cool. It went so well and smoothly. I think about it a lot. It was cool.
Do you think one day you might put together an event like that?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, it'd be cool. It'd definitely be cool. I don't see myself as like a ringleader at like Ludwig in that regard.
Right. I'm just like the host.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess that like I've done things like that before. Like, but I don't know. Maybe.
I also look back as things like that as so Ludwig's, publicly talked about how a lot of the events he does don't make him money.
No. Yeah.
they lose money.
Yeah.
But to me, that's why they're so worth doing. Whenever you do something new, you don't know yet if like, oh, it's going to make money because it's so novel. But he's like pushing the envelope forward. Like he's doing something that hasn't been done before.
Yeah.
And like, that's why it's so precious, such a creative moment to appreciate. In a way, it's like, who the cares if it made money?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt the same vibe, just like sitting in the audience. It's like, this is a moment. This is happening. This is really cool.
It was cool.
Did you go to the last Lud event I went to? Gosh, it's been a while. I went to the Smash Invitational he did about a year ago in Vegas at the HyperX.
Yeah, I was at
Were
that
you
one.
there?
I was there. Yeah.
See, I swear to God, I run into you like every other month.
If it's a Lud thing, chances are I'll be there. Just because I know all those guys so well. I didn't even mention how like I got to know those guys, but that was like initially when like that year that like I met Schlatt and stuff.
Yeah.
I just knew of Ludwig through like watching Melee and being a fan of like competitive Melee.
Yeah.
And I would like see he would like stream adjacently to like events sometimes, and I just found his stream through that. Well, I just knew him as like a commentator or whatever. But when he started doing his like Twitch Jeopardy stuff,
Yep.
I was like, that's when I told like Schlatt and some other people on like that server at the time, like, you should come with me and do this Ludwig show. Like this would be, this guy's
funny.
really funny. And that like video we did with him, his Twitch Jeopardy, was like his first initial like big video. And so I always say like, I made Ludwig. Like that was me. I did that. But yeah, but we became good friends ever since then.
I really like that. And yeah, Melee, man, it runs deep.
Dude, I think Melee is such a good way to find people that are passionate about stuff. Because to play Melee and to care about it, even if you suck and just watch it as a spectator, like you see something in the game that like the people that made it don't see.
Yes.
And I think that's so cool and unique.
I personally think its success, number one, was because Melee is a very hard game. Yep. It's not the one that you think would blow up, right? Like initially, now it's different. You had to like play in person, like with CRTs. The game is accessible to pick up and play, but actually with extremely high skill ceiling in terms of the technicality of how to be good and the strategy of how to play each other. All the quote unquote bugs and glitches we know and care about, right? Yoshi's tongue is on the Z-axis. Right? Like Roy has a pool noodle where hitboxes don't even feel like Game & Watch can't L cancel or shield. Weirdly, it makes the game better.
It's all little quirks that are just cool. I mean, you could probably make it better with some changes in that regard, but like,
well, that's like a SD remix. Or like Project M.
Oh, I love Project M.
I love Project M as well. I was really sad when it like totally died off, but I remember there were like a lot of like Junebug. There were a lot of people who blew up like on Project M. Like Smash God.
That was big on Twitch at the time.
Smash God is in his Mewtwo. I totally recall all that. And so like when you meet someone who's really into Melee, you automatically know like, oh, you like actually give it. Because there's no way you could like play this casually and like actually know what the is going on.
You see all the talent that comes out of Melee in that regard. I feel like there is like a connection between the passion for something like that and like having like a genuine motivation to like output something creative. Like you see like the BTS studio, those guys that they did all those events, they all loved Melee. And like, you know, Lud and his friends, all from Melee. You know, it's all, I mean, a lot of people through Melee.
I'm really convinced that one day we're going to look back on this pod. You're going to put together something epic, dude, because you have the passion and you have the care. And when you put those two together, even when things take time, they're better for it. And it's like, because like I can tell you just love these games, man. I've considered myself sort of like on like a mini break, like the past couple of years, really. Like it's just kind of how I looked at it, even though like my name's been out there, been doing events and stuff. Like in the way that I look at making content the past couple of years, I haven't really been like in it so far. I've been a bit out and like figuring out how I want to look at it. I'm a big believer life alternates between two phases. One is where you're wandering the desert.
Yeah.
And the second is you find the thing you want to do and you're just focused on climbing to the top.
Yeah.
But like you got to have both. Otherwise, you're never really, you might miss the bigger things you could do because you're so focused on the smaller ones. Yeah. So a different question. What would you say? I asked you the happiest, and we talked also about the coolest. What would you say it's like the moments in your life where you felt the most scared or sad?
Definitely like when I was in high school, I definitely had like some really bad bouts of like anxiety and depression and dealing with all that. And that stuck with me since, and I still figure all that out still. But it was like lowest actual moment. I don't know if I can like think of one tangibly off the top of my head. Again, there were definitely like times where before things started to like become like a job in this regard, that I was like, what am I going to do? Like I really had no direction, like right before things started to go well. But you know, then it worked out. I don't know.
I always remember reading, so Winston Churchill suffered from depression. As did Abraham Lincoln, but separately. Churchill always described it as the black dog. And in the context where it would always like be around in the corner of his eye, like a dog, it like follows you. And I've been majorly depressed before, not right now, but I always think of it in that framing, like the black dog, like you kind of always like, at least I'm always just like a little careful. You know what I mean? Like I know if like something didn't go well in my life and I'm really disappointed about something, I'm like, okay, I like have to go talk about it with my therapist or my friends, or have to like go work out or like go play video games with someone or like just go do something. I like know myself well enough now that like, it's like always like around there, you know? And for me, it's more just like about managing it and being aware. Yeah. So I kind of get what you're saying when you're like, you haven't been in the same place since school because that sucked, but you know, you're aware. Right. And it's kind of there.
That's the thing is that like I haven't been in that place, but like it doesn't feel completely addressed because like I got this out through streaming. So now it's like trying to figure the rest of that out.
I personally believe that anyone who's creating something new that they care about, I always want to go to them and be like, who hurt you?
Yeah. I've noticed that too. A lot of people have, to put out something creatively got stuff going on.
Because it's really hard to make something and expose it to the world. And I think to overcome the uncertainty and pain, it's because you really care, because a part of me just really wants to be seen and appreciated. And then, well, where does that come from? Clearly, I didn't feel that before. I didn't feel understood before. And so, yeah, I've noticed that a lot. It's like I was creating something. There's a reason why.
Yep.
Yeah, that empowers it all. The last question I have for you is, when you think of yourself in the future, right? Whether it's 1 year, 5 year, 10 years out, how do you think you want to be feeling?
Just want to be like at peace, I think. Like, I think a lot of the time with the way this industry works and the way that being a creator online works in how things are now, it's super busy in your brain that you're just never quiet. And I think some people have figured out how to manage that. None to think off the top of my head, but some I see that like they've got it figured out. And I hope I get to that point where I think having your brain be quiet and not having your thoughts running all the time is very is something I envy a lot, because I think I'm at my most creative when I'm not clouded by everything else going on.
It's like we do our best work when we feel secure and calm in ourselves.
Yeah. And I'm not worried about next month or 2 months later. I'm just thinking being very present is something I really want.
When in the past couple of years have you felt moments of peace and being present?
I haven't felt very present the past couple of years, I think.
And then what have been the biggest anxieties that the lizard parts of your brain think about?
It's just anything with content creation, I think. Yeah. I think that like definitely when I was like dealing with like the Minecraft audience more so, people that didn't really like actually watch me but were like knew of me sort of. A lot of that audience had a very scathing view of like jokes you would make or things like some admittedly like maybe once or twice a bit insensitive, but like a lot of the times just like completely stretching things I said or did. And it really made me look at myself differently and be like, man, like, am I the problem here? Like, why are people so bad about this? But like at the end of the day, a lot of that audience was being a bit ridiculous about a lot of things. But it gave me a lot of anxiety at the time too, about like how I would go about saying or doing certain things, or if I can even do things in that regard. Do people even want me here? Because like their audience would like my friends as their profile picture, like, oh, we hate Connor or things like that. Like,
what are they going to think of me?
Like it was just like, man, like, do these people even know me? Like that really started to get to my head.
I think through a version of that as well. It's weird. Back in the early days when nobody knew who the I was and what I was doing, it was really easy just to like go and do whatever, because like, I don't know, if it didn't work or whatever, like who cares, right? And the more people who become aware of what you're doing, I feel this like really weird, like sunk cost in my head mentally, where I become afraid of like pissing people off.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, cool. So like people like kind of follow me now and whatever. And great. So now if I screw up, oh, it's even worse.
Yeah.
Because people are going to know.
That's definitely a anxiety. Not that like I think that like I'm someone that's prone to like making mistakes that would be like whatever, but like it is still something that like is in the back of your head.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Especially to go through a vibe where like these people are just fucking hating on you. And it's like, I want to turn to them and be like, hey, assholes, like guess what? If you want to do anything new and different and creative in this world, there's going to be a bunch of you out there. Because if everyone liked what you're doing, you'd be like the most lowest common denominator human being ever. We're like, oh, everyone likes me. Like,
it's like when Mr. Beast like gets hate on like a charity video. It's like, man, you really can't win.
Oh yeah, literally, Mr. Beast is like, yeah. So like, I decided to like cure blindness. Like, you know, like to be clear, yes, it helps my channel, but also like I'm curing blindness. Right. I'm helping it's people like, see. And
like, come on, man. Like,
people are like, dude, I'm offended.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's really hard to like appreciate yourself.
I think that like it's easier to like throw stones and like you don't know like creators and people. Like I think that like because like I've met so many people, the biggest people, like I've met Mr. Beast and known him. It's like I just see things differently in that regard. Like even celebrities now, I don't look at celebrities as like commodities anymore, like I used to.
Yeah.
Because like I totally understand now. Where I'm like, damn, that sucks. Like your life's in the magnifying glass like that because like. There's no way your brain is operating normally.
Whenever somebody is being canceled, a lot of times I'm a little bit more patient because I'm like aware how easy it is for people onlooking to just jump on a creator or a celebrity or an influencer, just go hard.
The dog pile is crazy.
It's insane.
Even when it's justified, it's still crazy to me.
It's like just terrifying. And so whenever even like celebrities, I try to be a little bit slower because it's like you don't realize what it's like to be publicly viewed in a parasocial way.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Have you met your community?
I've met some at like in-person events and stuff. A lot of like the people that I think like my core community that watches don't really make it out to like TwitchCon and things. Like a lot of times, like when I go to like those events, it'll mainly be like people that like knew me through like Minecraft and stuff. And like I can tell like they don't really watch me. But like I've met a good couple that do, and I can tell that like they reference something. I'm like, oh, okay, you're like an actual viewer.
The deep cut.
Like you actually know, and that's always cool to see.
Who do you think of as your deep community?
Anybody that's watching me play Overwatch 2, I think at this point.
Like you're basically going back.
Yeah, it's like if I'm playing Overwatch 2, it's like, and you're here, like you must be pretty dedicated because not many people are watching this game though. But it's like half a joke. But if people are watching my variety stuff in general, I can usually tell.
And then it goes back to your earlier point where you're like, hey, as I think of Connor today is tied to his creation, to his work that other people see, which also helped address a lot of the depression you felt when you didn't feel people appreciate your creativity. And it's a lot of pressure to be creative. So what are the pieces outside of it? I can see like, it's just hard because for you, creation and making content changed your life. It's like such a meaningful part of who you are and what you are today.
It became my life.
Yeah. And then now, but today you've reached a size where you don't even have total control over like how people are going to see your content, what people are going to think.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Well, that note, thanks so much.
Hey, good note.
The giant life question that frankly, neither of us knows how to address.
Listen, maybe I'll be back and I'll have an answer.
You'll be like, I have figured out the secret to life. I'm here to share it back again.
I hope so. I hope.
I look forward to that. I'm gonna say, dude, thanks so much for making time just to hang.
Of course. This is awesome.
Yeah.
This is really good. You had really good questions.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
No, there's so much depth and thoughtfulness to how you think about everything you do.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Like, I'm not kidding. I see you as an artist.
Oh, you mean me specifically?
Yeah.
Oh,
no. Like you, the guy sitting in front of me. I see you as an artist.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Like you think Michelangelo, like every month, it's like, hey, like go put out another thing. Like,
yeah, true.
No.
True. Yeah.
You know, when he painted the Sistine Chapel, that was a brand deal.
I didn't know that. No.
The Pope literally went to him, is like, you need to paint the Sistine Chapel. He was like, I don't know. He's like, I'm the Pope.
Yeah.
You're going to do this. He's like, oh, my back hurts. Fine.
That's actually awesome. I didn't know it was a brand deal in that regard.
Yeah, like he did it because he had to.
Yeah.
And I think people forget, like, to be creative in a capitalistic society requires finding the balance between this is what I want to do and like, oh God, like I have to put out content and people are going to like need to financially support me somehow.
Yeah. That's become a lot more tangibly recognized to me now that I live in LA and things are a lot more expensive. Like I look at my bank account, I'm like, oh.
And so that's what I really get when you're like, hey man, like for the past few years, you're still making content.
Yeah.
Because like you need to.
Yeah.
But it's different from what's the next big creative work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really get that. No, dude, that was
awesome.
fantastic. Ooh, how do you feel?
That was great. It was a good talk.